Dr. Ron, and I'm coming back to you with another episode of Boomer Life Lessons and Stories. And yes, it has been a while, and my apologies for that. Life gets complicated, and you just react to it and do the best you can. But I'm hopeful that we can re-engage once more and move forward with these life lessons, because I do believe in sharing. Sharing is important, and if you can add my lessons learned to your lessons learned, you'll do better than I have done. And that really is the purpose. I wish all will be better off at some point in the future than they are today. So before we get into the details of today's episode, and it is inflation and its impact on money, which is kind of an interesting topic to discuss, and probably very timely given where we are. But before we go there, if you could please like, share, and subscribe. All right. So I think before we get into the discussion of inflation, we really need to talk about what is money. And essentially, money is, or currency is, a storer, S-T-O-R-E-R, a storer of value. Now, money can be, it can have both intrinsic and extrinsic value. But today's money, since we have gotten off of the gold standard and the silver standard, it has little to no intrinsic value, and all the value that money has comes from the faith that we put into it. Money is issued by governments, countries, and the more faith people have in a currency, the more valuable it becomes when compared to other currencies. So that's important to remember. It is a store of value. So what else does it do? Well, it eases the business of conducting transactions. Of course, that's all about business, isn't it? We engage with other people to provide some net gain to the company, to our families, etc. But without currency, without money, we would be left to the barter system. Now, what does that mean? Well, the barter system says, if you do this for me, I will do that for you. And both of you get some value out of that transaction. But, it becomes a little more complicated if you want somebody to do something for you, but you have nothing that you can do or provide to them that is of value to them. However, there may be some gentleman down the way that does have something that is of value to them. So if person A wants something from person B, and person B wants something from person C, it doesn't work unless there's something given back to person A. So perhaps person C would have something that is of value or needed by person A. So where does the tax come in? The tax comes in making a transaction in the barter system with the effort to find those individuals that has something of need by the other person. So money eliminates all the complications with the barter system. It says that I get paid for the effort that I put into a company in dollars, and dollars has an extrinsic value due to the faith we have in the government and in the currency. Again, today's dollars have no intrinsic value. No, it's not based on gold or silver. So it's all based upon the faith and trust that people put into the government or other governments. And if our country wants something from another country, we can transact in our currency as long as the other country has faith in the value of our currency. Obviously, the other country might want to transact in their own currency. So currency makes these transactions both at the local level, at the national level, and at the international level doable, because we can transact easily with pieces of paper or electronic dollars, if you will. Whereas the barter system has all sorts of complications. What is of value to us may be of little value to the person we want to trade with. So dollars come into play in that regard. So when we start looking at currency and money, money as a store of value, we have to ask ourselves, how does our currency become more dear or less dear? And what that simply means is, how do things become more expensive next year, and why do they do so, versus what they cost us today? The example I always use, and this is not an advertisement for McDonald's, but let's say that I bought a Big Mac today, and let's say the Big Mac costs $3 today. Now, I don't eat Big Macs. I don't know what they cost, but let's say for the example, this is true. But next year, I want to buy the same Big Mac, and it costs me $3.30. That represents a 10% increase in the cost in terms of dollars for the Big Mac. But to me, I would be getting the same value, the Big Mac, to enjoy for my lunch, but it costs me more in dollars. So that must mean that the dollars are less valuable going forward due to some cause. Now, what is that cause? What causes the erosion of value of our currency? Well, essentially, one could say that it is too many dollars chasing too few goods. How about that? It's kind of like you come across a gentleman just coming out of the desert, and you have one bottle of Coca-Cola, and he is in great thirst. And if he has any money on him, he's probably going to pay any amount of money that he has for that ice cold bottle of Coke, given that he's been out in the desert for several days and has had little to drink. But then again, if he stumbles upon, say, a community of people that has a flourish or a large amount of Cokes available, and he can get any one of them, then there's competition for his dollars, right? So if we have too many dollars chasing too few goods, the goods are going to become more pricey in terms of dollars. But if we have too few dollars, right, chasing a large amount of goods, then the price of the goods is going to drop. So inflation really is the erosion of value, what we can buy with today's dollars at some future state. And generally, we look at it on an annual basis. So the annual inflation rate, I think today, is somewhere around 8.5%. So what does that mean? Well, what that simply means is this. Excuse my paper rattling. What that simply means is this, that whatever we're going to buy today with the same dollars that we used last year, it's going to cost us more dollars. The example of that, and this may not be a really good example because presently, again, as I said, I think the inflation rate is somewhere around 8.5%, but the price of gasoline per gallon, we were paying somewhere in the neighborhood of something like $2.57, depending on where you live in the country. But where I live today in Texas, it's costing me somewhere around $4.57. So that's like a $2 increase, and that's a significant increase. It's approaching 50%. Why is that? There's too many dollars chasing too few goods. And it's an economic condition. So you have to then begin thinking, what is the impact overall to me regarding inflation? Let me go to the whiteboard just to put the point on all this. So we're going to say that the y-axis are dollars, and we're going to mark it off right here. This is $1, and the x-axis is time. Time always transpires to the right. So over time, when we're in times of inflation, the dollar is going to lose value. So at some future point, we'll say T1, we can only buy, or I should say, our dollar is worth, today's dollars is worth only a fraction. It's lost perhaps 50% in this example, only a fraction of yesterday's dollar. So what that means for that same Big Mac, we're going to have to use more dollars to purchase it. It's not that the Big Mac is any more valuable. It's just that our dollars has eroded in value. Okay, so now let me stop the share. So now what does that mean? Well, if you think about it, the cost of just everyday living expenses gets more and more costly for us, because what happens is as inflation increases, our salaries lag. They do not increase, if at all. They do not increase as rapidly as inflation does. So what that generally means is that we're earning less and less under times of inflation without some type of adjustment to keep up with inflation. Now, truthfully, I never thought I would see the day when I would be in an environment where companies would have to not only give you a merit increase, that's how well did you do your job, how much do we appreciate you as an employee for doing this job, but they're now considering and having to do something called a COLA. Now, back in the late 70s and early 80s, as I entered into the job market, the companies that I worked for would give me a merit increase and a COLA, another percentage added to my merit increase. Well, what's a COLA? It's a cost of living adjustment due to inflation. Because what was happening at that time was that had they not given me the cost of living adjustment due to inflation, as they were hiring in new employees, they were hiring new employees in at a higher rate than perhaps what I was making. And if they didn't give me that cost of living adjustment, I would be 2, 3, 4 years with the company, and new hires would be making more than me. So in effect, inflation does erode your salary unless it keeps up with the pace of inflation. What else does it do? Well, it erodes the value of any savings in dollars that you have. If you have $10,000 today and inflation's running at 10% next year and you do nothing with it, say you put it under your mattress, you don't have $10,000. You have 10% less, which would be $9,000 in terms of purchasing power for goods and services 1 year from today. So overall, inflation reduces the standard of living because everything that you have to buy, food, gasoline, etc., is more expensive. And if salary doesn't keep pace with inflation, each and every year that we're under these large amounts of inflation, we're losing ground in terms of salaries and what we could buy. So what do you do about it? That's a very good question. What do you do with your investments? Well, you look for investments that increase over time and do keep pace with inflation. There are things like the Fortune 500 stocks, right? Blue chip type companies that as the dollar inflates and gets less valuable, those stock prices are going to go up and keep pace. So mutual funds that have a good track record and are well managed are pretty good vehicles to keep pace. Now, I'm telling you all of this based on my experience and for entertainment purposes. You need to find a financial advisor and work with them for your investments. That's my strongest recommendation. What else could you invest in? Well, you could invest in real estate. Now, there are some concerns today that we're in a real estate bubble and the price of real estate is going to come down. That could very well be, but I'm looking at all the people migrating to the United States. I'm looking at other states losing populations and coming into here in Texas. I think that Texas is going to have a robust economy and there's always going to be a demand for real estate. Maybe certain sectors might be hurt. But in any case, real estate is viewed as an asset. And generally speaking, over time, it's gone up and up in value. I would say this, you hear a lot of hype out there on the internet about gold and silver. And believe me, I do like gold and silver, but it's so very, very unstable and you can't predict it. And oh, by the way, gold and silver does not throw off a dividend. You only reap any benefit or loss when you sell it. And there's a cost of transacting in that sell, just so you keep that in mind. So stocks, mutual funds, bonds, all of those return some type of dividend payment or interest payment. Excuse me. Now, you have to be careful. I'm not going to go into the details of stocks and bonds because the value of bonds react differently than stock does to interest increases. I'll just show you this as an example, and then maybe later we'll get into it in a different episode on investing. So let me clear this up. Now, we all know from our childhood this idea about the teeter-totter, the seesaw, right? And over here we have, we'll just say this is interest. And we'll say over here, this is the value of a bond. And as interest rates go up, the value of the bond goes down. So what does that mean? That means that there's going to be greater and greater opportunities for people to invest in other areas, paying higher rates of return than what the coupon rate is on the bond. And if you don't know what the coupon rate is, that's for another seminar or another video. And as the interest rates come down, we'll try to kind of make this bold, the price or the value of the bond goes up, right? And so why is that? Because as interest rates go down and down and down, I mean, we've had interest rates that were paid for savings by banks of less than 1%. And if you could get a bond paying 2-3%, you were ahead of the game. And oh, by the way, inflation was very, very low at that time. So you need to know more about the investments that you're going to take your money, your hard-earned money, and invest in times of inflation. You need some professional guidance. So I would always recommend that you go to a financial advisor and you look for how you could invest and diversify your investments. Don't put them all your eggs in one basket, as they say, because if that particular part of the investment industry goes down, you could lose quite a bit of money. But if you're diversified, as one part of it goes down, another part would go up, and overall, you would be okay. What else should you do? Be patient. Don't be quick to react, because if the market falls and you sell at the bottom, you've guaranteed your losses. Invariably, when a stock market does crash or a real estate market does crash, it recovers over time, sometimes as quick as 2 or 3 years, sometimes a little more than that, but it does recover. Okay. All right. We want to manage the risk. We want to diversify. We want to seek financial help in terms of the professionals. I hope that when we start thinking about inflation, we think about it in terms of what it means to us. Let me show you something right here, and then we'll end this video. This is a 100,000 mark note from the Weimar Republic. And at that time, I believe a mark was worth a fraction of a cent. Now, I also have another coin. It's a silver mark from about 1905, and it was worth a little more than $1. So what happened from 1905 to 1923? Not just inflation, but hyperinflation. The Weimar Republic is actually characterized by the hyperinflation which it went through. It was so bad, inflation was so bad that the cost of money was devaluating so rapidly that waiters and waitresses at restaurants would stand on tables shouting out for the hour what the price of their services were, the food was. That's pretty bad, isn't it? And at that time, it was cheaper for people to make baby dolls for their children to play with out of German marks than it was to go buy one at, if they could find it, at the market. So hyperinflation, inflationary times creates instability, and you want to seek an island of stability by your investments that you buy with your savings or your money. Because if you don't put them in investments that keep pace with inflation, your dollars are eroding. Just think about the person that put the $10,000 under the mattress and they incurred 10% inflation over the year. they lost $1,000 in purchasing price in yesterday's dollars. So you've got to do something. You cannot do nothing, right? And that's the reason why when my parents bought their house in 1963, they paid about $8,000 for it. And when they sold it in around 1976, 77, they sold it for over $20,000. Yeah. Why was the house more expensive? It wasn't that they'd done a lot to it. It's just that inflation eroded the value of the dollar. How bad can it be? Well, look at this note from Zimbabwe. I've got it in a protection holder. $100 trillion. How would you like to go pay for a loaf of bread with $100 trillion if you could buy it for that? See, there's no predicting in times of hyperinflation what the future is going to be like and what you're going to have to pay. And as a matter of fact, you can just look south toward Venezuela and all that those good people have gone through with hyperinflation. The barter system of commodities have taken root because the currency is worthless. Okay, guys and gals, I'm not telling you all of this to frighten you. I'm just sharing this with you so that you can be aware and perhaps think critically about what you should do in terms of staving off the impacts of inflationary times. With that, you take care of yourself, be well, and all the best.